Now, some may argue we are in the midst of a long peace since 1945 and that we've had very few wars as compared to the first half of the 20th century. Does the violent turmoil in the Middle East and the pervasive threat of terrorism now signal an end of this extended peace? Is the Third World War likely? Or are these episodes just forms of instability other than open war or terrorism to threaten to cause massive disruptions across the world? In this context, can India promote and lead strategies which foster peace or at least play a role in diffusing geopolitical tensions? We discuss this and more in our dialogue for War and Peace. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, may I please request you to take your seats? For this discussion, may I welcome on stage Tarek Fatah, author and columnist with the Toronto Sun. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tarek Fatah. Next, we welcome Rajni Bakshi, author and Gandhi Peace Fellow at Gateway House. Joining this panel, we'd like to welcome Sameer Patil, expert on national security, ethnic conflict and terrorism. Sameer will also be moderating this discussion. So with that, it's over to you, Sameer.
Bag and a little heavy. But just to wake you up, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you think that today we are in the midst of a third world war? Wow. Okay. 4 or 5, I think. Three. How many of you think that we will see a third world war in the near future? Okay, fair enough. Thank you. So we have two great speakers lined up here, Mr. Tarek Fatah and my colleague Rajni Bakshi. I'm not going to stand between you and the audience, but before that, I want to set a stage for the discussion. 100 years after the First World War, here we are in 2016, where the images of armed conflict and violence still dominate our conscience. If the geopolitical rivalries between the state actors were not enough, we have the non-state actors, the Daesh or the Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda, espousing their cause through grotesque violence and vitriolic propaganda. Some would say, and I don't think that there are many here, that we are already in the middle of a third world war with what is happening in Iraq and Syria and also in Eastern Europe. Certainly, the Daesh believes that it is fighting the last battle against the infidels, or the battle for the Armageddon. Maybe we can dismiss that view, but that is the vision guiding the cadres who are fighting on the ground. And then there are the statistics. According to the Global Terrorism Index, since the beginning of this century, more than 60,000 terrorist attacks have taken place, which have killed around 140,000 people. But we also need a context to look at those statistics. As per the World Health Organization, you are more likely to die 38 times more than in a road accident than in a terrorist attack. Also, homicide. There are more than 18 times homicide deaths as compared to the terrorism worldwide. And you also would like to know that the Daesh or the Al-Qaeda is not the most lethal terrorist organization in the world. It is the Boko Haram, which is operating in Nigeria. To be precise, they killed around 6,600 people in 2014, slightly larger than the Daesh. And yet, somehow, what happens in Brussels or in Paris dominates our news space and mind space than what happens in Ankara or Lahore. Now, all this has created an impression that Islam is in a civilization confrontation with other faiths. But what has gone unreported is that common Muslim, a common Muslim who is a devout Muslim, but also has a clear sense of global identity, and their struggle against those Muslims who have chosen the path of violence. We need to pay attention to that. And it is in this context that we're discussing the issues of war and peace. So the broad format that we have agreed is that each of our speakers will give opening remarks for 5 minutes each, and then we'll have a small Q&A for 15 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for the audience. And with that, Mr. Fatah, it's your floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm a bit troubled since morning what I've been hearing. And it almost seems as if too many people are playing the, what did Nero play? Fiddle, as Rome burnt. And this has troubled me a lot, knowing the Indian diaspora in North America or even here. Most of you are oblivious to the fact of what is happening around you, below you, or in your neighborhood. I'm struck by the emphasis of the South China Sea being the focus of so many Indians, when the real threat you face is from the Straits of Hormuz, and not even it was just a passing reference to the Chinese port of Gwadar, which is a base for Chinese nuclear submarines, and the acquisition of Pakistan by F-16s that can deliver tactical nukes. That's just 1/10 of the issue that civilization faces today. During the Second World War, it took us not more than 5 years, maximum 5, I would say 6, because the Second World War didn't start in Europe, it started in Africa and in China and Japan. But in 5 or 6 years, we destroyed the world's largest military machine of the Wehrmacht. 30 million Russians died, a million Indians. More than that were the Chinese, but few of us have read in the subcontinent, read history that way. And yet, in 15 years, we have not been able to even defeat men in caves or SEMI or LET or JEM, you name it. With absolute carelessness, the elites of the Western world have sought to make lots of money out of this crisis. And with an attitude that says, who cares? I mean, I'm shocked that nobody thought that the war was on. This world war has been on for 15 years. It has benefited a lot of people in the financial sector, on Wall Street, and the no reference to the Panama Papers today actually also, I beg your pardon, my background is journalism. I'm never going to make 1/10 of you guys make, but you hold the reins to power. Nobody wants to die on your side, and your enemies wish to start life because they believe life begins after death. It's not a joke. Your most liberal, secular Muslim cut off your 2 limbs, made Pakistan and Bangladesh, smoked cigars and ate pork. What did you do? You said, oh, Indus is gone from India, let's dig up Saraswati and build a mythology around it that it used to exist. So what if Sindh is gone? You just thought it would be located in somewhere in Bombay, South End. Let's make money. Let me read to you 55 years ago what an American president said to a group like you, except they were not finance people, they were newspaper owners. This is April 27th, 1961, JFK speaking to him, and I'll repeat the words and how timely they are today and how blind we are for our arrogance that we display with such oomph. JFK said, and I quote, "Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, yet no war has been declared, no borders have been crossed by marching troops, no missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say no war ever posed a greater threat to a society. If you're awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can say that the danger has never been more clear, in its presence has never been more imminent. He went on to say, we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means of expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human material on a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. That was 1961. What happened is some wise people around the world thought it best to defeat communism as a battle of ideas. In this battle of ideas, you are conflicted by a demonic force that is called Islamism, that is based on the supremacist idea of Muslims who will dominate this world and take a one-way ticket to paradise when everyone is under their tutelage. You may find it amusing, you may find it titillating, but that's the reality. And unless and until you wake up and discover that there is war within India against you, that you're being fooled on your western borders, and you demonstrate cowardice by pretending that your real enemy is China. $42 billion are being poured in Pakistan in constructing that Gwadar port, owned by once the Sultanate of Oman, offered to Jawaharlal Nehru, refused by him. A war in Balochistan going on the entrance to the Straits of Hormuz, from where your connections are, and the road is being built. 50,000 Chinese troops live in a territory that India calls its own. That's Gilgit-Baltistan. But I can assure you, I went to the Institute of South Asian Studies at JNU, and not a single grad student knew where it was. Nor did he or she know where Balochistan was. Everybody wanted to be a professor in that class.
Sorry, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Let me conclude by saying it's easy to live in a world where you can dream up enemies that will never fight you. To even think about China making a corridor through India, it just tells me that either Indian academia and literati are cut off from reality, or the fact that they were just fooled by the Pakistanis by allowing ISI people to come to Pathankot and then telling them, get the hell out of here, we are no longer talking to you. Tells you that India, which has the promise of winning this war, is not even willing to fight it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rajni? Sure.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Samir. I think Tarek has made some very grave points about reality checks, which I hope we can take up in the discussion. But I just wanted to begin by drawing your attention to the theme that was chosen for this gathering. And I thought it was quite appropriate in a different way, perhaps from in the way it was intended, because the most poignant moment involving the Ashwamedh horse is in the Ramayana, when 2 teenage boys surprisingly hold back the whole of Ram's army till he has to personally come into the battlefield, what was an unexpected battlefield in the middle of the jungle, and see who are these boys and what gives them this kind of power to hold back his entire a very well equipped, large army. And of course, as we know, they turn out to be his sons. And that's how the story is commonly understood, as a kind of a, Barjatia films reunion moment of the father and his lost sons. But I would submit to you that there's a deeper meaning to that story. Love and Kush represent those out in the cold, those out of power, those who have been left voiceless, those who have been left unrepresented, and who have the courage to speak truth to power. And it is in that context that I would like to present a somewhat different view. All of what Tarek ji said, I agree with. All those threats are real. I am not at all in denial. However, I would submit to you that the real clash of our times is not a clash of civilizations, in the ethnic sense, in the identity sense, in the religious sense. There is, if anything, a clash of what Edward Said famously called a clash of ignorance. To me, that means that on the one hand, we have fundamentalism and unreason of all sides, I mean of all colors, of many, many religions, not just Islam. And on the other side, we have democracy and the willingness to think things through, to reason them out, to be able to live with ambiguities, to be able to grapple with uncertainties and journey through the choppy waters of the 21st century accordingly. The biggest enemy of our times is any energy in civil society, in politics, in private business, or in any international fora which wants us to close our options. By close our options, I mean which wants to narrow our frame of reference. So I'll give you just two examples from within India. The safest way for India to proceed forward in what is actually a war is for us to make India the most prosperous and the most safe place for every Muslim. Nothing will undermine the agenda of the Daesh and its many, many cohorts than that will. That means what? We have to make a distinction between the organized groups that are definitely on a track of what is called the 1,000 cuts strategy, make a distinction between the organized ideological elements and those who feel left out, out in the cold, powerless, voiceless, unrepresented. And if we are able to listen for the concerns behind the complaints of those here who are the voiceless and the unheard, then we will be able to very tactically and strategically and morally overcome the threat that the organized elements that have actually the destruction agenda, we will be able to overcome them. The other example I'll give, and I'll stop there, is the Nakshal situation in the heart of India. I don't know how many of you are aware that when you look at most maps that are done on violence in the world, India appears in pretty deep red. Most of them use, shades of pale pink to deep red, and India appears in the red because we have this huge internal war. And there again, I apply the same appeal. It is a problem, but it is a problem that is being made 100,000 times worse by not being able to make the difference between those who are joining the Maoists because they are unheard and left out in the cold, and those who have an agenda, who have a systematic agenda to overthrow the constitution of this country and replace it by some notion of a Maoist, utopia. God knows what that is today, because it is not applicable in the country where Mao was born and built his rather fatal paradise. So I'll stop there. I have many things I would like to add later about the role of business, but I don't want to overstretch my 5 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Fatah, recently former British Prime Minister Tony Blair made quite a provocative statement where he said that many millions of Muslims hold a viewpoint which is fundamentally incompatible with the modern world. Can you hear me now? Okay. He made a statement where he said that Tony Blair made a statement that many millions of Muslims hold a worldview which is fundamentally incompatible with the modern world. Now, as someone who has argued for liberalizing Islam...
No, I have not. I have not. My position is religion has no place in politics. I can believe in flying horses and flying monkeys, and my grandmother can do that as well. That should not affect what the Lok Sabha passes. Let me address this question. First of all, ma'am, both Love and Kush had cities called Lahore and Kasur. There's not a single Hindu living over there in Ram's two cities. The enormity of your example should reflect, should have scared you in making that. Why? You have come to accept a genocide of Hindus in Ram's sun city Lahore and shrugged it as if it was dandruff. And I said, hota hoga. Number two, Kesh, nothing. Indus, nothing. Now, this left-wing viewpoint, which my colleague Majid Nawaz calls the regressive left, is frightening. Every piece of evidence shows that the more educated a Muslim, the more radical he is. I've never met an unemployed hijacker. I've never met a suicide bomber who couldn't read. Why are British teenagers, third generations, who would not go out on a prom date, are willing to fly out and live with 50 husbands and have sex with them as slaves and come back pregnant with the pride that they have in their bellies? 3 more jihadis. Lord Desai knows more about this. I am not yet qualified about what's happening in Britain. The person who sliced the head of Daniel Pearl was aristocratic, upper class, London-born, London-educated Pakistani. The 2 people who attacked San Bernardino were not cab drivers of New York. The New York bomber was an upper-class Pakistani. When you accept Pakistan's entity and do not look at it as the source of international terror and is a hatred for India, its foundation that we will go and conquer Delhi again, chances are that a whole lot of Indian chattering classes and the Aman Ki Asha Tamasha people are on amnesia. And I'll tell you how bad the situation is. The first mosque of Islam was not built in Mecca. It was built in Kerala in the year 629. You name me a single UP Muslim who has said, I want to go and do ziyarat in Cochin. Never. These are short, dark people. The racism of post-13th century Islam suggests that me or an African, if we think we're equal to Arabs, we're committing an act of sin. Why else do you have every Indian Muslim with an Arab name when the Arab spits on that the Indian? Do not mistake this left-wing theory as a solution, because we are in the midst. You are not at risk, ma'am. I am. My daughters are. My relatives are. I have friends who died in Bangladesh in the Mukti Bahini, killed not by the Indian army, but by the Pakistan army. Why? Because they were white, fair-skinned Punjabi Muslims killing dark-skinned Bengali Muslims. 3 million died. Not a single Indian Muslim came out on the street to say, Band karo ye katleam. They were with Pakistan.
If I can hold your thought there and allow Rajni to.
Tarekji, I would ask you just one counter question. But before I ask that, I just want to share a bit of history. My family, the entire extended family, came from what is now Pakistan. Okay? I seem to be very fortunate. My ancestors were clearly very clued into the trends of the time, and they escaped well before the worst of the violence began. My parents were married in India 2 years after partition. Manjeet Kriplani, Neelam Dev, three of us in Gateway House are from families that have left behind actually their ancestral lands. So we have no muluk as we
name it, sister.
Ji?
Sindh. Name it. Because only Sindh is Hind. I'm telling you, why can't you name that Sindh is what Hind is? That's where Indian civilization was born. On Mohenjo-daro, on Taxila. And you were, as Hindus, asked to leave. It's like asking a Muslim to get out of Mecca because we just got some cleaning to do over here and got a few thousand Ethiopian soldiers who will now live over here. If you are not reacting with a certain amount of contempt for the man who did it, and the philosophy of two-nation theory. How dare any Indian accept the two-nation theory that he or she as a non-Muslim is second-class citizen and a Muslim cannot live in a country where Hindus are a majority? That is what the foundation document of Sharia, Islam and Jihad is. And we cannot get away from 15 years of this talk. Please, all of you were victims of a cultural genocide. If we hate Hitler, we have to hate Muhammad Ali Jinnah with the same. And we cannot repeat this again and again.
May I submit, Tariq ji, that hate in any case is not the answer. Whether it is Hitler or Jinnah, or for that matter, Nathuram Godse.
I hate 6 million Jews dead. I'll hate the guy who did it. I have no qualms. I'm not in the business of being politically correct. If my heart burns that when Hitler killed the Jews, I have the right to hate him. I'm not a political person, nor do I seek promotions. I'm retired, I'm 66. वैसे ही 60 साल में कहते हैं सठिया जाता आदमी. I'm okay. I'm okay.
So you talked about jihad.
Yes.
But if you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and
yes,
he has most of the times when he talks about terrorism, he has talked about the idea of delinking religion from terrorism. And if I can quote one of his recent remarks where he said that of the 99 names of Allah, none stand for force and violence, and the first two names denote compassionate and merciful. Those who spread terror in the name of religion are anti-religious.
Here's the point, sir. Then let the
while some have argued that moderate Muslim is an oxymoron.
No. Let me say something. If he has to say that, then he has to say that all of Sharia should be out of the realm of Muslims. He's quoting the Quran. 90% of Sharia is written after the Quran said, today I have completed your religion for you. Ek Allah ka Islam hai, ek mullah ka Islam hai. You got a choice. You can't collect Sufi mullahs around you and say that this is the good mullah. There is no good mullah. The Prophet wouldn't recognize what is an imam. Our mosques are built on the Eastern Orthodox Church's domes of Damascus. The Sikhs copied it from us, not knowing that it's actually a Damascene symbol. We cannot afford to... Look, I gave the example of the Second World War. You got Mao Zedong fighting alongside Chiang Kai-shek. You had Stalin as an ally to Roosevelt. Why? The world's most potent form of human destruction was at hand. The difference was that both Hitler and Stalin wanted to rule the world. Now we are in a worse situation. The proponents of Ghazwa-i-Hind, Jihad and Sharia want this world to come to an end so they can take their one-way flight. They consider Earth to be a transit lounge. They're not worried who cleans the toilets. They're looking for the earliest flight. That's what all of us do in a transit lounge. ये दुनिया आनी जानी है, फानी है. This is our belief that this world's got to come to an end. Let's catch our next flights. The only Muslims who can work are the ones who have denounced jihad. If they haven't denounced jihad, they're part of the problem. Because what we ask them to do is denounce ISIS, no problem. Even ISIS will denounce ISIS if they have to make something out of it. Denounce LET, denounce LET. एक मुसलमान बताइए Indian leader who is willing to denounce the doctrine of armed jihad, or who can even list what is the doctrine of armed jihad, whereby I have a duty to invite you to Islam unless you're already a Muslim, which I don't know. But if you don't, then I have to assess who is stronger. If I'm stronger, then you have to pay me a tax. If I'm not stronger, I have to be stronger than you. And then I have to kill you if you do not pay tax and do not submit. Aap kis baat ki baat kar rahe hain? What are these Azadi Walas in Kashmir doing? Who killed Tej Bahadur? What was he doing? What business did he have to chop off people's heads? And you named a street after him? Aurangzeb Road in Delhi? The guy who massacred Indians? I mean, this has to end. We need to be able to speak the truth that there were Muslims like Dara Shikoh and there were Muslims like Aurangzeb. We as Indian Muslims have to embrace the Dara Shikoh and reject the garbage that came.
Thank you. Rajni, you have written about Dara Shikoh, and so maybe it's your chance to reclaim some of
I had the privilege of seeing the very wonderful production that was put up by the London Theatre. It's a Pakistani play actually, very finely done. I think I would just disagree with one dimension, Tarekji, that these histories are complex. Both Dara Shikoh and Aurangzeb were complex figures. And many of the things that we like in Dara Shikoh, his syncretic cultural abilities, his many commitments to scholarship that were multicultural. Also, we have to remember that he was the person who proved to be incapable of garnering the kind of support that would have actually made him emperor. And by contrast, for every story that you have about Aurangzeb destroying a temple, there are stories of Aurangzeb also patronizing temples. So I just wanted to say here, actually my point basically is that if we legitimize hate as a methodology, hate as a reaction, as a visceral reaction, everybody can understand. We are all human, we feel anger, we feel hatred, we feel irritation, especially when we are hurt, either physically or in terms of our dignity being offended. But the moment hate is presented as a path of action or the basis of what moves us in this world, then we are already on the track which leads eventually to ISIS. And it's a slippery slope. That's not a slow track on which, there are easy to stop markers. And that's why Gandhi remains relevant. No matter how many temples they create to Godse in India.
Ma'am, you are hanging on to my one word and you're beating me about it. Let me be clear. I didn't talk of breaking temples. Aurangzeb was a murderer that you're trying to justify. Just one second. No, please. I didn't say he broke temples. Temples breaking is the least thing. Just 1 second, Lord Desai. 1 second. One second, Lord Desai. Did Dara Shikoh murder anyone?
He never became a king.
I'm saying, look at this. Lord Desai, I didn't interrupt you. You can ask a question. But this is not the House of Lords.
If I can,
and I'm not Lord Nazir.
If I can interject.
I'm not Lord Nazir. No, I have to answer
please.
Please, this is very unfair. And it is a disease that is rampant in left-wing liberal India. One guy murders his brother, brings his head to the father, throws it and kicks it. Then he murders the gurus of the Sikhs. Then he imprisons his father. Then he takes his sister on the Red Fort because she was dating a commoner and throws her over the wall. Then he kills his son. Then he goes to Golconda. He destroys everything. Plus, he gives the East India Company a firm base on the island of Bombay after they had been cornered over there by the Balochistan Navy. Now, if you are going to compare a murderer and the murdered and say they are complex situations, my goodness, what has gone wrong with the Communist Party of India? Is this Dangis? Is this Namudi? Do you think EMS would have accepted this? Do you think Dange would have accepted this? Would Kaifi Azmi have accepted this? The left wing today in India is so right wing, so debased that they protect burqa, they protect polygamy, they protect Muslim personal law.
Not all of them.
Just a second. I live in Canada and I'll tell you what. My biggest problem is not just the people who want to kill me, But my problem is the liberals who want to polish my murder as if there were complexities. He wore a miniskirt, therefore he got raped. A murderer has to be killed or hanged unless you come out against the death sentence. You tell me when a terrorist in India, a Muslim terrorist who's hanged, gets 60,000 Muslims in his namazi janaza. And when Tanzim Ahmad dies, fighting for India, there are 150. You got a serious problem here. And you've literally taken a gun and put to the government of India and said, I'm a Muslim, I got a beard, and my wife's covered in a black sack. You can't do anything about it. So Mamata Banerjee, now listen to how bad India has become. Iqbal hated Tagore because Tagore got the Nobel Prize and Iqbal was... Tagore got the prize because he wrote about the Persian poetry of the gay poet. Anyway, so he writes to the king of Iran, Tagore is a black Bengali Hindu. I am the Kashmiri Punjabi Muslim who knows about Persia. They didn't let him, they didn't even mention him. In Iran he's called Iqbal Lahori. He's not called Allama Iqbal or anything. The man who hated Bengali, who created Pakistan that said Bengali is a Hindu language, was celebrated by Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal. Why? Because you got to cater to that Muslim vote that is somewhere located, that can burn up a village, burn up your BSF, burn the trucks, and make sure that while Kunaiya is a hero, that other guy who criticized Muhammad, Kamlesh Tiwari, will remain in jail forever. So unless and until you recognize that we are facing Islamofascism, a threat to humanity, because Pakistan's got 50-kilometer range nukes, thanks to Britain and the United States of America, who can be bribed. The politician, the Assistant Secretary of State, sir, was fired, and everyone in this room should know why. The State Department files were found in a hotel where the Pakistani High Commissioner had access, and those files went to Islamabad. That's the wife of the man who died with General Ziaul Haq in his crash. You have 400 Pakistanis active on Capitol Hill. Where are all the Indians? They want to be CEOs.
Okay, thank you. Rajni, you have worked on the idea of trusteeship and the fact that you also talk about the issues where the business can play a role in addressing the root causes of conflict, maybe through corporate social responsibility and those kind of things. Would you like to elaborate a little on that?
Yeah. But first, a quick response to Tariq ji that the critique.
Which is going to invite.
No. I just no, because I'm saying that there were many sweeping statements that he made also about left, this and the other. The point I just wanted to make is that the basic liberal humanist human rights position in India is very diversely articulated, and it is not to be equated with any communist party or any one branch of left or right, etc. And the real struggle is against fascism in all its forms.
Which other form is there nowadays? So, who's bombing London and New York and Lahore and it's Islamofascism. Is it done by RSS?
Sorry? No, one second. That I'm not at all disagreeing that there is Islamic fascism. But the point is that there are many forms in India as well, and when people can be killed for what they eat, that also is a form of fascism. When an under trial boy on the way to meet the judge who will hear his plea can be attacked by the lawyers in that same compound, that is fascism. And why is that not fascism?
You'll get time to ask your questions.
No,
please, don't disclose.
Sorry, you have to wait. You have to wait till you can answer. You have to wait your turn to ask the questions. So, in answer to Sameer's question, there is an elaborate history of business attempting to enter into many of these conflict situations across the world. Much of it will not qualify under what Gandhiji called trusteeship. Gandhiji's basic insight was that both capitalism and communism would eventually fail, to the extent that one is Human because it does not recognize the vibrancy of the individual, communism, and does not respect the importance of initiative and the entrepreneurial spirit. So that's why communism is doomed. And capitalism because it, in those forms where it puts profit above all else, and regardless of the ethical, moral, human context. So that was Gandhi's idea of trusteeship. And that is a long story. You can all read about it. We have a paper coming out from Gateway House soon. But the point I just wanted to make in the context of this conversation is that business communities have in many situations, engaged with conflict by trying to solve it. And the first thing they have all done is to break the discourse of hatred, is to break the discourse of tit for tat. Because truly in that sense, if you can dispute anything else that Gandhi said, but there cannot be, it's physics that, an eye for an eye will make the world blind. So the 2-3 big examples that I would like to give you, I'll start with India. There is a group called Citizens for Peace that persuaded about 8 major corporations in India to sign a voluntary charter called Business for Peace. I can give you the guide, the link to that. It's, the website is just Citizens for Peace, and the charter is on there. Among the signatories are Infosys, Mahindra, Zensar, and the bigger example, because it's a very large institution, is in UK. It's called Business in the Community. It was born many, many years ago as a response actually to inner city riots, which were partly race riots. And the businesses that were being hurt by that sustained violence and vandalism got together. Today, Business in the Community is one of the large charities supported by the Prince of Wales. And the third and last example is from Colombia, where, as you know, there's been a 50-year civil war with a group called FARC. And in Colombia, many businesses have mobilized to try and be part of the search for peace. And all the, complicated negotiations that involves, and the very, very painful task, which actually is the crux of the matter, and I'll close with that. How do you build a peace that does not dishonor the hurt of the victims, and yet also allows the society to move forward? And so really my main response to Tarek ji is that I feel that here in India, the reason why we have a better chance of showing the light to the world on this problem of conflict is because of precisely the kind of conditioning that we imbue. I think my peers of my age who grew up as children in families where partition was a running narrative, is because we were taught from day one that you have to look forward. And yes, there are problems, but those problems cannot be solved by deepening the divisions, by more accentuating the hatreds, by seeking revenge in any form. Injustice has to be countered. And that can only be done through civility, or what we say in Hindi, sabhyata.
Thank you.
Let me address the business issue. Do you know in the Second World War, leading up to it, every aspect of Nazi Germany's financing was done by American banks? Are you aware of it? And that is why after the World War ended, the loans were considered written off. Do you know that every major corporation and Wall Street guru is in line with the Saudis? Do you know why Hillary Clinton and both Barack Obama have to bow down to the Saudi king, the humiliation of seeing that? Do you know why the main funder of ISIS today cannot be touched? Because of corporate ties with the Saudi royal family. Because everyone can be bought. In the end, if you say, "Isme apne dhande mein fayda, humko kya padi hai dusre se?" That's what's the guiding principle. These are not the business classes that stand up and say, there is something deep going on in the United States of America and we're going to speak about it. They're not the Microsoft CEO or other people. I can tell you of one Sikh entrepreneur, or not even an entrepreneur, billionaire in Canada, who gave away 26 apartment buildings as a gift to a foundation, to charities, and then he wrote to these American billionaires. He said, whether I had 20 billion or 1 billion, I found it didn't make any difference. So those 26 apartment buildings in Vancouver are now funding social groups and charities. Elevated, that's real. You cannot find his name anywhere. There's no foundation about him. But the vast majority of people in finance are less concerned about humanity and more concerned about the bottom line. This is why I'm saying that to you. I could never say that to an American group or European group of financiers, because you are Indian essentially first. Deep inside you are the Vedas and the Islamic teachings of our gurus who came over here, like Bulle Shah, who taught us what it is to be human. So as financiers, for goodness sake, you need to put that social equation into it. And for goodness sake, try to understand. These jihadis mean business. They are not going to spare anyone. Read up Ghazwa Hind. Ask your Muslim friends to denounce jihad. Try it. Try. Even Tarek Ali might not do that. This is what we are facing. We gave a pass to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. We should not give a pass to anyone who seeks to chop off this country into 50 parts. Because only India, this civilization, has a past and a future. Not even China. Not even China, because every Chinese goes to America and becomes John or Peter. Harminder remains Harminder. Where he might be called Harry, but he's embarrassed about that. यार मैंने हैरी सबके सामने तो ना कह रहा ना, but Vijay remains Vijay, So that is my point. I make no brownie points out of this. I'm telling you, most of you are blind. For goodness sake, don't judge a television's output if you can't see it. For the blind man in a Balochistan jail where I stayed 1 year in 1970, he couldn't tell the difference between a TV and a radio. Tell me why. He was in prison. He couldn't see. So the fark ki hai dono ke beech mein. That discerning power can only come from those who are actively fighting fascists, not in theoretical conferences, but on the foot, whose lives are in danger, whose friends have died in Bangladesh, in Balochistan. I mean, I can't believe that you discussed everything about security threats to India and nobody mentioned the word Balochistan or Baltistan. And Baltistan, by the way, India claims is its territory. So with that, I'll
Thank you.
This is the last thing.
We have 10 minutes left for the Q&A. So please be brief in your queries if you have any question, but no comments, please. Thank you. Yes, the lady. Please.
Can we have the mic?
Yes.
I come from Delhi, and whenever I take a flight into Mumbai, and I usually stay in the BKC area, I pass by some localities where I see the Pakistani flag being hoisted on a few houses. And every time that makes me feel that anybody, I don't know whether he's an Islami, Hindu, Baluchistani, jihadi, non-jihadi, was what has denounced, but he is enjoying the tax that I pay for. He's living in a city, in a very rich area, and he's displaying a flag of a country which is not this. Not knowing about the history, not getting into complexity. What is it that we are trying to do about this younger generation who's not feeling patriotic enough to have the passion that some of us need to have to save our country from the wars?
See, both of you? So,
Yes.
Because I have a very small informational answer for you, that there is something in Bombay called the Mohalla committees. I do understand there is a problem here with the flags, and it's not been solved as such. But it's important to mention that since the riots of 92-93, the Mohalla committees have had a sustained presence on the ground, and the reason you never hear about them is because peace is so little reported. And they have many times been in these communities, and they have built bridges between communities, and they have removed points of tension with some success.
Yes, let me answer. Let me address the question. Look, many of you may not know that Prophet Muhammad strictly forbade the eating of cows. No Muslim from Indonesia to Turkey to Saudi Arabia, anywhere eats a cow. No Pathan eats a cow, no Sindhi eats a cow, no Punjabi Muslim ever ate a cow. We first saw cow slaughter when the UP and CP and Bihari Muslims came to displace the Sindhis of Karachi. I have done a deep analysis of meeting with these people, even in India. The issue is that by slaughtering a cow, it only happened in areas where there was a Muslim Nawab and a Hindu majority population. And it was one way of establishing, thumbing your nose at the Hindus. Kya kar sakte ho tum? Bahadur Shah Zafar was the only Mughal who said, Bakra Eid ke din koi gaay nahi kategi. These issues need to be addressed because the leadership of the Muslim, whether it is the Congress or the BJP, has been assigned to the mullahs. You imagine if Minister Modi had 10,000 Muslims for an Eid at some large area, and nobody wore a burqa over there, and nobody was a mullah. They were auto rickshaw drivers, accountants, clerks, welders. That is the real Indian Muslim. But the non-Muslim deals only with the Muslim who has a beard, or is wearing a hijab or a niqab, because you have developed stereotypes as to who we crazy people are. So the people who made Indian, North Indian, Hindi belt Muslims eat cows, they didn't want to follow Islam, because Muhammad said this animal is only for milk. I can bet you never heard of this prior to what I'm telling you. The Prophet Muhammad said that मैं अरब हूँ लेकिन अरब मुझ में नहीं है. मैं हिंद से नहीं हूँ लेकिन हिंद मुझ में है. And his son-in-law Ali said कि वो जो ठंडी हवा आती है हिंद से उसमें खुशबू है. He never sent a letter to the Indian rulers to convert to Islam. In fact, his families got refuge in a Hindu Sindh by Raja Dahir. Not a single Indian printed book acknowledges the fact that it was a Hindu king who created the first mosque in India, and it was a Hindu Raja in Sindh who accepted Prophet Muhammad's family who were being hunted in Arabia. So, ये बातें कह के ठीक होगा ना? You cannot gloss over things and equate two very evil, an evil man with his victim. That is very dangerous. So, there are ways forward, and I'm positive, and I think only India can deliver it. But if you keep recognizing Sufi mullahs as the answer, my goodness, they are worse than the Wahhabis. Because at least the Wahhabis are educated. These guys just wear fancy hats and dance. There's no Sufi in them.
Thank you. Any other question? Okay, gentleman at the back.
This question is to Mr. Tarek Fatah. You have said in, I think, a previous interview, how you feel that India was, Pakistan was a creation of the UK and more so the US as a buffer against what was then the USSR. Now that the USSR is no more and the Cold War is no more, do you think that there is some possibility for a reunification on the lines of what happened in Germany? Thank you.
Look, Pakistan is bound to break up. It's not a country. It's not a state, it is a state of mind. It exists in many people's heads, right down in India to Bangladesh to Burma, among the Rohingyas. It is the concept of the Islamic State. The first Islamic state ever in Islamic history is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, not ISIS. Now, it has to wither away. There was never a Pakistan, there will never be a Pakistan. But Balochistan or Pashtunistan or Sindh have been there for 1,000 years. Sindh has to take back its Hindu population and embrace it and say, we are sorry what we did. That you cannot move ahead till there is compensation for the hundreds of thousands of Sindhis, Hindus who were expelled from Karachi. And you know, I have to share this, how it happened. There were no race riots, no religious riots in Karachi, even up to partition. It started in November when the first trains of UP Muslims came. They took over certain areas, they beheaded a Hindu, put his head on a spike, and in the heart of Karachi they said, 24 ghante mein nikal jao sab Hindu yahan se. And that's when the Zoroastrians also fled, the Jains fled. Karachi was a Hindu majority city. So it will break. There's no point in Balochistan joining India or nothing. It will be a Bhutan or a Nepal or Ceylon, is type ka atmosphere hoga. But as long as there is a Pakistan, India will not find peace.
Thank you.
I think that was the last question because we are running late. But thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you very much.
We'll take the next question. Okay, we'll take one last.
Sir, actually you answered my first question because I have studied Quran Sharif and the second chapter is dedicated to cows. So as a family, like I'm born into a Hindu family, so I always was confused. Like the whole chapter is about cow and how do they propagate eating cow. So
Surah Bakara hai na?
Yeah.
So aap bakre ka translation kar lijiye cow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what part of Bakra can't you understand?
No, I
not okay.
Okay.
Let me get to the Quran. This is very interesting, and this is at the core of the Muslim identity issues. The Quran as we read it is not the Quran that was revealed. Because 300 copies of the Quran were burned during the third caliph. This Quran that we have, it's not that it is not the Quran, it was arranged by the biggest chapter first and the smallest chapter last. So it is not by a logic of chronology, but by a logic of size. Which means you start from chapter 15, then go to 84, then 3, then 75, then 6, then 18. And then when you can't understand it, the mullah says, you must be a sinner. Now all of us are sinners. Everyone knows they're a sinner. You know, sabne exam mein cheating ki hai, ya kisi ka laddu chori kiya, something like that. Right? So now, first of all, that is wrong. Then how do we teach children the Quran? We teach them in reverse order. So first we jumble everything up in the incorrect way, and then we go to the child and say, read the smallest chapter first. So he's reading it in reverse. For goodness sake, why can't somebody print and publish the Quran as it was revealed? And there was a great Indian writer, a Muslim leader, Amir Ali, great scholar. Poor guy started writing, compiling it, the Quran as what was revealed, but he died before he could do it. And everyone started saying, Dekha, we told you, you tackle with this, you die. Right? So my 3-year venture is, I'm joining with Majid Nawaz and we are producing a book called The Quran as it was revealed. Just the chronology, plus saying, this is where the Guptas were in the year 570. And to say that in 670 the world was in ignorance is an insult to the Gupta dynasty. So, it's not said in the Quran that the world was in ignorance. It's the mullahs who came 100 years later who said. So, don't worry. Bakra Eid means bakra, not cow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very engaging discussion.